This is MFT Raw and here's the camera news. And let's start with Olympus. I think this is going to make a lot of Micro Four Thirds fans very happy. A leaked photo has emerged of a new camera from the brand that we all was a little bit worried about just a few months ago. It seems like Olympus are far from dead and will be continuing their pen line with the pen E-P7. This is the first product from Olympus since they were sold off last year, and there's no pricing or specs available just yet. But what is obvious is the beautiful retro styling, which was the reason that I bought my first Micro Four Thirds camera, which was the original pen EPL1.
So?
Interestingly, there's a switch on the front of the camera that appears to switch between color and mono modes, and the screen articulates downwards, I guess making handheld selfies a bit easier. But what's more is that rumored to be released about the same time as the camera will be the Olympus 8-25 f4 Pro lens that they announced on their roadmap back in August 2020. Pictures of the new lens have also leaked and it looks very much like some of the other Pro Series lenses that we've seen, such as the 12-24 f4 and the 2.8, which of course is no bad thing. The Olympus Pro lenses are extremely well made, quality pieces of kit. It's a fairly complicated optical formula of 16 elements in 10 groups. We've got one DSA lens, two spherical ED lenses, one super ED lens, one ED lens, one super HR lens, one HR lens, and another HD lens.
What did you say?
And the lens is splash and drip proof. That's right, no typo, drip proof. It will also feature image stabilization and has a minimum focusing distance of just 23 centimeters at all focal lengths. Personally, and I know maybe I'm asking for too much, but I think it would have been really nice if this lens was a little bit faster. Perhaps an f2.8, it'd have been great to be able to use it as a portrait lens at its long end. And especially when you consider that the direct competition for this lens is the Panasonic Leica 10-25 constant f1.7. Almost the same focal length, also with the constant aperture, but it's much faster. However, the Olympus is going to come in at nearly half the price at $1,099. You can expect outstanding image quality from both of these lenses. Maybe further down the line, if the f4 does well, then Olympus might grant my wish and release an f2.8 version. Who knows? The pen E-P7 and the 8-25 f4 are expected to be announced on the 9th of June and will be available from the 25th. But this new retro camera from Olympus will have some serious competition. Also in June, Nikon are rumored to be releasing an APS-C retro style camera with styling taken from the old school Nikon FE10. Mechanical dials and feel, but mixed with the latest tech. Not much else is known about this camera at the moment, but it is expected to be announced this month. Canon have been really busy over the last few years, and not just with the development of their recent R5 and R3 cameras, which incidentally they have just shown off the R3 to some journalists, more on that later. But they've also been developing a brand new type of sensor called SPAD, or single photon avalanche diode, which on the one hand has amazing specifications, but on the other hand, it doesn't really sound so impressive. I know it sounds a bit confusing, but this is a 1 megapixel sensor that has a maximum shutter speed or readout speed globally of 24,000 frames per second. It was actually back in June 2020 that Canon first announced that they had developed this SPAD sensor with such a high pixel count. One advantage of this sensor is that it completely eliminates the noise. It works by registering each and every individual photon that hits its surface and then converts that photon into an electrical signal. 24,000 frames per second is incredible. Perhaps even more impressive is that it captures each frame using a global shutter, meaning that the whole sensor is read at the same time, rather than scanning across from left to right, which in turn eliminates any kind of rolling shutter. Now, this type of sensor, at the moment at least, won't really have any consumer level applications. I mean, nobody's going to want a 1 megapixel sensor anyway, no matter how good the image quality is. So don't expect to see something like this in a consumer camera anytime soon. It is much more suited to industrial applications where high speed, high resolution imaging is needed. But who knows if they can get the resolution up to even a couple of megapixels where you can shoot 1080p video. But the fact that Canon managed to get the resolution up to 1 megapixel is an impressive achievement that was previously thought impossible. So if we do see a consumer grade SPAD sensor, it won't be anytime soon. Sticking with Canon and gear that we can actually buy, they recently released a development update for the Canon R3, Canon's most advanced mirrorless camera to date. This one is aimed at professional photographers, sharing the same basic form as the 1DX series with the vertical grip while still being more compact, as you would expect from a mirrorless camera. On the back, the button layout is very similar, but there are some noticeable changes. One is the fully articulating touchscreen, which I think is a first for this kind of professional camera. But interestingly, if you look at the viewfinder, it's huge. It seems to be twice, 3 times as big as what you would usually expect to see on this type of camera or on any type of camera. This is thought to be so big to accommodate the eye-controlled autofocus system. And if you look closely, you can actually see the screen of the viewfinder inside there, and it is a lot smaller than the iCup suggests it would be. It is hard to say, but it will be really interesting experience when I finally get to try one out. Canon have shared some of the specs, such as the sensor will be a backside illuminated stacked CMOS with shooting speeds as fast as 30 frames per second. There's no mention of the resolution, which does make me think that this won't be a super high resolution monster like the R5. Between 25 and 30 megapixels, I don't think photojournalists and sports photographers really want more than 25, 30 megapixels to work with. They also said the camera would be capable of 4K video, another reasoning for the reasonable megapixel count. Strangely, they did not mention what type of 4K video or bit rates or codecs or anything, so they just said 4K video. They didn't even mention frame rates, which I guess is fine because this really is a photographer's camera. And finally, Sony have released a new micro four thirds sensor that technically should be capable of keeping pace with its own backside illuminated sensors that it puts in its Alpha series of cameras. The stacked BS1 micro four thirds sensor IMX472-AAJK is a backside illuminated and stacked 20 megapixel 4/3 type CMOS active pixel sensor with a 12-bit digital output. This 12-bit output makes it possible for the sensor to read out a signal from the 20 million pixels at a rate of 120 frames per second in still shooting mode. It also features all pixel readout mode, as well as various other readout modes. Listed are normal, phase difference, single pixel, and HDR. Much of the specs are listed in the press release. You can pause and have a look at the video if you want, or I will leave a link to the press release down below if you really want to dig into the specs. I think it's about time that Sony put some of that tech that it uses in its full frame sensors into the micro four thirds system. We definitely need these types of sensors in the latest high-end micro four thirds cameras. If you sold your micro four thirds gear, then shame on you. You really shouldn't have. I mean, micro four thirds is far from dead. A lot of people were saying it was. You were listening to that Jared Poland guy, weren't you? Who? There's a lot of amazing looking gear that is genuinely going to allow micro four thirds to compete and keep up with those full frame monsters that are out there. And do it cheaper, do it smaller, do it with less heat, do it with less hassle. That's the beauty of micro four thirds. And for people thinking that it was going to die, I think you're just off your rockers. But anyway, that was the news. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll try and get one news video, at least one news video, depends what's happening in the week. I'll try and get one news video out per week. Hope you enjoyed my video. If you did, then you know to hit the subscribe button if I hit the subscribe button. More news and more camera reviews on the way.